Hello, you've joined on Second Thought with Mike and Luke. We love to explore and wrestle with the underlying connections and meanings of ideas, of culture, politics, relationships, science, faith, lots of other things. As we strive to understand our world, we're really inviting you to think again with us about what's true. And when you do that, then to really step back into your world with a refined purpose and some sense of renewed hope, and see if we can be, if you can enjoy it and benefit from it. Today, we're going to talk about some different things that have happened in the news recently. We're going to do a little bit of thought about the role of reason, trying to understand why some things have happened. A little bit about some technology and if there's what's behind this, good, bad. But first, hey, old man fashion. So you got what's your note on that?
Well, okay, so I remember when I was a kid, my grandpa, when we would go to church, we'd visit their house, right? And we'd go to church with them. And he would wear these white leather dress shoes.
Yeah.
And I just thought, where do those even come from?
Yeah.
And by the time I was in college, it was like, maybe I could get a hold of those shoes, right? Because they were kind of starting to be cool again.
Yeah. Right.
And now the fashion that I was wearing in the early 90s is now becoming cool again.
Yes.
I'm only 45, so I would assume when I'm 70, it's going to happen. It's going to go all the way through again.
The ties of the 80s are already back.
And so I adopted, if you heard of the term old man strength.
No.
Okay, so as a high school wrestler and then a young wrestling coach for just a few years, the wrestlers would often talk about how if you try to wrestle an adult man, he has strength that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And they called it old man strength.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And usually it's the grip. Okay, so I call it old man fashion. And there's something about the way old men dress.
I see where you're going.
It's like they froze at a certain point.
That's true.
And I have already done this on some degree. So it's
Yes.
in the sense that I've got a uniform that I basically only buy chambray or denim shirts and khaki
You're
pants.
sounding like Dwight Schrute.
Well,
Only the red,
part of it, part
yellow,
of the reason,
brown shirts.
originally it was like I heard about Einstein always wearing the same clothes.
Yeah.
And I was, as a math major and math teacher, I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I was noticing that in the cartoons my kids were watching, the characters wear the same clothes every
every
it's
day.
part of the character.
Recognizable.
And so when I became an elementary principal, I wanted to be iconic for those kids.
Sure.
And so I would wear the same
Yeah,
red shoes
I love
and the
that
same
idea.
outfit every
Yeah,
day
Yeah.
to
But
sort
how's
of
that
be identifiable with
Transition
them.
into the aging idea.
Well, if my clothes purchasing has stopped, maybe I'm locked into the old man fashion already. And like you were saying, I'm not progressing like maybe I wish I was.
Yeah.
But
So you're actually saying there's a potential good in it, and I suppose the joke is if you
well,
wait
there's always a
long
good
enough-
reason that you do it.
Yeah.
Part of what I'm thinking is, okay, and I had old man fashion in mind in all this process, and I have for a long time because I get a little bit interested in fashion, maybe more than normal people do. And
I'm gonna leave that alone.
I know. So, but I'm always very purposeful in what I would buy or wear. And so I was trying to buy clothes that would look normal at any era. The fit is always going to change. I find, a denim, like jeans are always going to be around, but it's the fit of the jeans that changes.
Yeah. That's true. I saw a lady just the other day with they're really bell bottoms, but they weren't bell bottoms in the 70s sense.
Yeah.
And they're not exactly the wide bottom that came about 15 years ago. It's just a new form, but they were definitely that's a genre in a sense.
Yeah. Well, and the loose fit jeans are now the cool thing again.
Yeah.
Or they're
But
on their way.
Down at the ankle, they're quite expansive.
Right.
But I ran into this. I did a funeral for a guy once, and he wore blue suede shoes. He was in his 80s.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing them and thinking the song, the Elvis song and everything. But what I thought more was for him, and he was coming to church. He hadn't grown up in church. He was trying to dress nicely. He was trying to be respectful and honoring is what he was doing.
Right.
And that's what it meant to him. And what I realize is we all have something somewhere in our time when we feel the height of something, and that's what it means to be cool, respectful, accomplished, arrived. And we may not actually at that moment have a good definition because I think a lot of those things happen to us in our late teens and early 20s, and there's a lot we don't know that we don't know at that point. But from wearing, and so I started asking my kids, and one of the things I did is I stopped wearing a watch because I thought, I said, nobody's wearing watches. I'm wearing watch. Nobody's wearing watches because everything's on their phone. I know you got to watch it. Watches have come back. This is about
Oh, yeah, they're
15
cool
years
now.
ago. I
Yeah.
know.
But it's a fashion piece now.
I know. It's
Right.
not the same reason that the watches
Well,
weren't
okay,
before.
so this is funny. I would say in middle school, I had this really like, why does Indiana Jones get to dress that way and we don't kind of phase, right? Because middle schoolers don't quite understand that you put that brimmed hat on and
Yeah.
walk around and it doesn't work,
It doesn't work.
or
That's
or
right.
the trench coat.
It's so interesting. Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted was a pocket watch.
Oh.
And then when I actually got it and walked around school for maybe 2 days,
my
in
goodness.
7th grade, nobody said anything.
Yeah.
I just felt so self-conscious. I never took it to school again.
That is hilarious.
But that's what a phone is. A phone is a pocket watch.
I know. That's true. That's true.
Way more entertaining though.
That's true.
Probably
I just-
as amazing as pocket watches were when they first came out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have this
Oh yeah. Right,
cutting edge
right.
technology in your pocket.
And yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. Well, old man fashion. There is something there though, in terms of on second thought, in terms of us, because it's not just an observation on a phenomena, but it's an observation on a little bit maybe on aging, a little bit on what is relevant, a little bit upon letting your kids help you, letting a younger generation help you. A little bit about well, I don't really care, so I'm going to do this. You know, there's a lot going into it. I don't know if I thought through all the way what's good, what's bad, but
Well, and I was listening to something today where he's talked about in your, at what ages, what do you say? This was one of those little short videos
yeah.
everybody wants to be TikTok, every social media platform, right? So this is one of those. He was saying in your 40s, you stop caring what people think. And in your 50s, you realize they weren't thinking about you anyway.
Yeah, that's yes.
And so I've always tried to figure out, how do I stop worrying about what people think about me?
Well, you know, I'm glad you just said that, because right before you said that, I thought maybe that's the crux. That exact words you just said.
It is the driving part of fashion.
Well, and what I was saying from a Christian perspective, I didn't mean it like that. From a reflective, informed by Christian. I mean, we're Christians, we can't undo that, but from a what's behind this observation.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe what's driving is clothes do reflect our constant struggle of who we are, how are we liked, how are we perceived, what do we think about ourselves?
Yeah.
And maybe the pinnacle of success there is at some point you just don't care. You dress with what makes you feel good, in a sense. There is some deference to society and what others see,
Yeah.
but there's a large satisfaction. So this guy who wears the blue suede shoes, I look at it and I didn't think less of him. I just had those series of thoughts like I don't want to get stuck. But maybe for him, it's just I don't care what you think.
Or those are the nice shoes he's had for 50 years.
They have. I like
You know what?
them.
Like
don't
I've
need to
bought
buy
dress
other ones.
shoes.
Yeah.
I bought like a $250 pair of dress shoes at one point to wear to work.
Yeah.
But they weren't comfortable.
Yeah.
I switched back to sneakers. That's when I did the red sneakers.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's like I'll have those dress shoes for the rest of my life. Like that's because
Yeah.
you buy a higher end.
I remember as a kid, I could never understand why my dad only had one pair of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't realize.
That's my dream, is to only have one pair of shoes.
Then I
But-
got a certain age, and it's like I've had these shoes a long time, and they're fine. They'll last
Yeah.
a long. It's like, oh, that's why you don't really change that.
But
much.
you have to, if you're going to do that, you can't buy anything that's cool.
or faddish.
Well, that's it. Anything that
yeah.
is cool is a fad by definition.
Okay.
So,
There's
and
some things
what's
that have a
interesting is
classic element.
there's a sales pitch in some quarters for clothing or coats, things like this, that it's timeless, right? But in fact, they're saying it's timeless because what's cool is like the 1940s blue collar outfit.
Yeah, I see.
So
what
it
you're
wasn't timeless 10 years ago when no one wanted to
saying.
wear it,
Timeless
but it is now.
the fad. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like there's a lot of men's fashion is trying to connect to masculine roots of like, I dress like a lumberjack or I dress like a factory worker in the 1890s. And you've never done either of those. And if you met anyone who has, they'd probably look down on you, but they'd also be wearing the clothes you're embarrassed to wear today, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So the camouflage and the Carhartts and that. Although Carhartts as a brand is going really really trying to get into fashion, which is funny all itself.
The car place people.
Carhartts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Homespun clothes. I used to read all the Louis L'Amour books. I mean, I read them all. But
Oh, yeah.
the homespun clothes. They were embarrassed when they go into a town.
Oh, like my mom made these for me.
Yeah, they were
That was
embarrassed.
totally me in sixth grade.
Yeah, it was
My
the
mom
same.
said, "Oh, well, I can make you jeans. We don't need to buy
Yeah,
Levi's." And we were like,
exactly.
"No, mom.
No way, Mom. I wanted painter pants. I never got them in the
Oh, I did.
70s.
I did.
Did you? Oh, I wasn't allowed to. It did never materialize.
Yep. So
Funny.
what's on your on ramp here? Your
Oh, on ramp.
speaker battle?
Okay,
Is that,
yeah,
is that
speaker
there?
battle, significant. Okay, so we just had this McCarthy thing, right?
Okay, yeah, the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, Speaker of the
Okay.
House. So, in part, the funny thing is, I watched a bit of that, or I checked in on it. I would say.
Yeah.
And a part of me I just didn't care. So that was one.
I
Part.
felt that way too. And then, so the commentator I listened to most, Steve Deace, he was on vacation when all that was going down. So he came back yesterday, and I hadn't followed it closely. I was like, that's cool that some of the hardcore Trump people were taking a stand, even when Trump himself was saying,
Yeah, I know.
back down.
I saw that.
And so then when I was like curious to see what Deace would say about it, and he just threw down in favor of those people and like coming out swinging against all of the conservative pundits who didn't back them. Because the actual things that they negotiated were really strong. It was like,
My word I've got on here is conviction.
Yeah.
As I looked at it, the actual things I thought were unimportant and insignificant. But the thing I think that was most significant is that it was a display of conviction.
yeah,
And I think that's interesting. Everybody, the Democrats were saying they're making fun of him, try to ridicule. And people were saying, and some on the right were saying, Democrats would never do this, right? They'd never fracture. The problem is that's some strength. There's a strength in that, but it's also a weakness.
yeah,
Because on the right, I would say one of the strengths is conviction. I'm not persuaded just because you think something. I think this is right and we should do it. And you don't. And I'm not just going to get on board. And I think the main point that comes with that is this. The right is, in a sense, driven by, I shouldn't say the right, I should say historically the right or conservatism is, let's just say Reagan. Leave people be, let them be, and give them hope, give them liberty, and they'll go out and prosper.
Well, and the people of the Leave Me Alone tend to be, I mean, even the hippies aren't really the activists, right?
Right? That's
Once
true.
they got weed legalized, they went back to their communes.
Yeah. But the left is trying. Their agenda is to actually change. I was going to say tear down and destroy. I do think that, but I was trying to look for a better word.
Progress.
That's
Yeah.
why it's progressive.
Yeah.
To make a change into what they think things should be. And the right, in a sense, really doesn't do that. They just want. I mean, I didn't want to get in your thing about conserving and what that meant, but in a sense, they want to give people the space to go live your life. Now, they do think there's some moral things that need to bind us together, but having liberty to be poor, to be not poor, whatever you want to do, you're free
Right.
to go and do.
Yeah.
We want to remove the obstacles. And in that sense, I think that's why the right fractures more, because they have space for conviction. Convenience and not getting along, but compromise defines the left, because as long as they tear down a little, if person A wants to tear down a lot in a matter, person B wants to tear down a little, if they can't get it done, person A is still getting some tear down.
Yeah.
On the right, if we disagree about something, there's not necessarily a reason. We're not trying to incrementalism doesn't work for the right.
So
Inherently.
Well, so I want to. Here's something I've noticed.
Okay, go.
Okay, and that is the party in power says about itself always that we are unified and the other people are falling apart.
Sure, that's a good
And
point.
usually that's true because the party that's out of power is needing to reorganize and retool.
Something has gone wrong. They
to get
lost
back in.
confidence with people.
So you were talking about progressive and conservative. I am now more and more convinced of progressive. Maybe you'd call it liberal. I think that a healthy community will always have both conservatives and liberals,
Okay.
or conservatives and progressives even.
Are you looking at my note about definitions?
Well, I worked
those
on
are my old notes.
I worked on my political
Oh, you
coordinates
got a thing
here.
Okay.
I'm going to show you think it's a good moment?
If you want
I'm
to
gonna
go,
show it.
I was about to transition to ask. I was about to ask you about AI.
Well, I'm
but
going
if you
to
wanna
do
this
2 minutes on this.
Is this your quadrants? Is
Yeah,
this what you're calling
yeah,
four
yeah.
quadrants? Can people see the screen?
They can. Yeah.
All right.
All right, so
I've never seen the screen. So.
no, I made it the other day. So so traditionally in the middle here we've got what is left and right, conservative and progressive, right?
Okay.
And the
Okay, now
progressives are
here's the thing.
future
I'm not
future
gonna,
focused.
I'm going to interrupt you a bunch.
All
Not
right.
because I
You
want to
can't hold me to
interrupt
2
you.
minutes anymore then.
I know, that's fine. This is one of your bigger things, but only because I want to make sure I'm following and tracking and have time to process. So the
Yeah.
left, right, in the middle
Yep.
is conservative, but you have the word progressive, not liberal.
Correct. And I'll
Is
show
that
you
on
and I'll show you why.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
So, and progressive, because the way I think of progressive is future focused. Okay. So they want progress and they want to reinvent. And if they have to tear down to reinvent, I think that's part of a
Okay,
reinvention
and you're
process.
doing this in the best of sense terms.
Yeah. So kind of steel manning that
Because
side of things.
there's a progressive element today that it's not.
Well, politics has changed in the last even 15, 20, 10 even.
Yeah. Woodrow Wilson progressive was that exact thing, this idealistic.
Right.
Anyway. Okay.
Yeah, but he also had his authoritarian tendencies, right?
Yeah, I know.
And so that's
I
the
know.
vertical axis. And
Yeah,
so
okay.
sometimes you hear it called leftist instead of liberal, right?
Yes.
But
did you see my note about when I was going to ask for your definitions about 6 terms there?
There it is. So I'm going to show you.
All right.
Okay, so a leftist is someone up in that top left corner. The most extreme case would be communist.
Okay. Pause just a second. Do your vertical one first then.
Yeah.
Your
So
up
the
and down,
vertical
and then get the
is
corners.
authoritarian versus libertarian.
Okay. So tell me what you're meaning by that.
Okay, so if someone is authoritarian, they want the government in particular to rule, to dominate at its most extreme, and it's always tied to whatever your identity group is.
Okay. Wait. Are you saying about that you said want to dominate?
Yeah.
Would you also be saying the same thing if I said look towards authority to implement? Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Because that may not be the same as I want domination. Somebody
Well-
say, I don't want anybody to dominate. But
But
that
if
doesn't
you
mean-
look at how much fear was rolling around during COVID, the people who were traditionally liberals,
yes, that's
libertarian
okay,
even,
that's what
right?
I thought you meant. Yeah.
Liberals in the sense of they're progressive and libertarian. So that normally is that lower left hippie quadrant. They moved up because they were afraid.
Right. So they're looking to an outside authority to make things happen.
Right. But so if you were an
That's what I thought you
authoritarian,
meant.
ambitious authoritarian who said, well, maybe I should be the one in the seat of power.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is your number one method because it brings people up the vertical axis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now do the bottom. What do you mean?
All right. So libertarian is individuality focused. So when you're talking about group, it's small groups, individuals at the most extreme. I mean, you could go all the way down and say we want no government, and there are a couple of voices in popular media that are getting attention for being anarchists. They just think there should be no government, right? That everything would be handled by the people within their community, neighborhood, town, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree, right? But I see their point.
Well, only you're saying it's an extreme.
It is as far as you can go
Like, our
is to say there's no
Constitution
government.
says we got to have a national defense.
Correct.
And so they have some basic things that don't go to that extreme of libertarianism because we can't function.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so
Okay.
what I'm noticing here, so I saw this, there was
Okay,
a
wait,
meme that went around.
One more thing. So you got up and down,
Yep.
authoritarian, libertarian. Now, left and right. What I think you're doing is you're making adjectives out of those two words, and you're plucking them from the common nomenclature today and saying, I just want to use them as two adjectives. I know they get used today, but you're reinvesting them with a positive
Conservative and
aspect.
progressive, you're
Yes.
talking about.
That the progressive is look toward the future, whether good or bad, or
Weren't they
let's say
always
biblical
adjectives?
or-
What would you say they were before?
Well, I think progressive is the name of a perspective today.
Yeah.
And I think conservative is now, especially during the Rush years, he didn't like using the right. He moved away from Republican because Republican
what
and
does
name
Republican
owner.
stand for? Yeah.
Yeah, so he started saying conservative as opposed to liberal.
Yeah.
And now conservative is being, the word right is coming in differently. So I think it has operated
Well,
as
because here's how I would describe it.
denominational political term.
I think conservative is a perspective that says I think the best
Is
days
that
were in
dot
the
following
past.
your mouse there when you did that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think our best days are in the past, and if we could get back to where we were, that's the ideal. Progressives are the other way around, and
Yes,
it explains why younger people tend to be progressive, because to them,
Sure.
most of their life is in the future.
Okay.
Older people, most of their life is in
Let
the
me
past.
say this. I'm not going to object to your thing here, but I think what I would want to point out is I think you're making a particular point, and the use of the word conservative there, I understand why you're saying it, but I haven't liked it. I've heard you talk about this for probably a year, maybe the first time I heard you a year.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I didn't like about it at the time. And it had to do with the conserving part, that part. And it's
Yeah.
not that I think you're wrong in what you're saying, but what I think is that is there's a lack of helpfulness in that term because I don't think conservatives are trying to hold sacred the past. I think if you ask Rush, he would not say he's trying to hold to the past.
Okay,
I
but
think
who
what
are the
he's-
hero? When you listen to conservatives talk,
Yeah,
all they keep bringing up is Ronald Reagan.
I understand.
I've never
but
heard
I don't-
progressives bring up
But
anybody.
I don't
in
believe
the
that's
past.
because they're
They don't
trying
even
to
talk about
preserve the
Obama
past.
anymore. It's always something in the future, the next thing they're going to do.
I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think but I think
You're just saying it's incomplete.
it lacks something. And so when I look at that,
Yeah.
you notice I pushed back and trying to understand what you're saying about progressive. I asked you if it had good and bad, and you're looking for a positive adjective because that's, in my perspective, that's a negative term.
Right, but the people I know who hold that view,
Don't see it that way.
it's the way they would
I
describe
understand.
it.
I understand. But on the right side, the word conservative, okay, so they would see it as future, but their opponents would not. I think the conservative.
Well, I'm their opponent, and I would agree that that's how they
okay.
look at
So
it.
I don't see that. But
But
because
I don't
I
oppose
actually don't see
progressives
that.
as much as I oppose authoritarians.
oh, I understand. I'm not talking about opposing in a good or unhealthy way.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the progressive, for example. And this actually gets to one of the things I was thinking about, the role of reason. And I won't go into it, but I'll just say, to me, that future perspective thing and the reason kids are in it, which I think is a good point, by the way,
Yeah.
has reasonableness in it.
Yep.
To look to the future there's a positive in that.
Yeah.
And then we may criticize what they're doing and looking to the future or whatnot. But I actually don't think that's what progressivism today is. It isn't
Okay.
looking to the future. I think it's an active destruction of what God has instituted as human norms.
Okay, so
Do you see what
tell
I'm
me,
saying now?
I do, but tell me if you agree with this.
Okay.
And that is what's the dysfunction we're seeing now is that the edges have gotten so far apart that all they do is attack the other side. So progressivism, when it's at peace with conservatism, does well.
When has that been? And what would be an illustration of that?
Well, so if you look at you like to talk about Rush, and I appreciate him and grew up listening to him.
Yeah, yeah.
So I remember listening to Rush in the late 80s, and I was in like middle school, growing up, and thinking, why doesn't he ever just call Clinton a liar? Right? I guess that's the 90s. But he would never say it. He would say, that sounds like an untruth. And as time went on, now that's all we say, right? It's more than a liar. It's like now we're saying they're pedophiles, right?
Yeah.
We've gone as far apart as we can without actually tangibly murdering people in the streets.
Right.
And we've gone there a few times.
Polarization is increased.
Okay, so that doesn't mean the views are wrong, because I think looking to the future, looking to the past is great. But if you look to the past and say anyone who wants to reinvent, get them out of here. And if you look to the future and say any part of tradition, any statue, any commemoration, we got to get rid of it. It's the attacking the other side that's the problem. So if you looked at how we worked in the 80s, it was an argument about what should our moral stance be, and have we considered both sides of every argument.
Okay, so let me jump over the conservative one. See, when you say looking to the path, that doesn't resonate with me personally. Not your description of what you're trying to say. I hear you.
Yeah.
But
You wouldn't describe yourself that way.
I would say I'm a conservative, but I would say it's not looking to the past. It is, there are people in the past who I think what they thought is, I think that's right. But there are people today who I think that's right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with time. It's not a past issue. That's why I think it is more. That's why what I said.
So
it's giving liberty to live rather than looking to the past.
But that's why libertarian is in the vertical. Is that what I'm saying? Because the liberty focus is in the vertical axis.
Right. Okay, wait.
So let me show you a little more. Okay.
I don't mean it that way, though. I know what you're saying. I hear you on that, but that's not. I shouldn't have used that word liberty then, because it confused it with the vertical piece.
Well,
let me
but
give
this
an
is
example.
Freedom is the focus of.
Wait, let me give an example. The Second Amendment. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Controversial one. I believe in the Second Amendment and the desire to take away guns. I don't believe gun violence is the fault of a gun. I think it's the people that do wrong.
Sure.
So I happen to agree with the Second Amendment as it was put. I do recognize there's a historic element of militias and the context there. I think that's a legitimate exploration. And then what does it mean today when guns are different? I think that would be a healthy conversation.
Yeah.
But the fundamental agreement I have is that it's the right of an individual to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's looking to the past to do that. I just happen to agree with them.
Yeah.
And I agree with Reagan, but I agree with people today. So I feel like I'm a conservative when it comes to that point, but it has nothing to do with trying to preserve the past.
Right.
But
well, I think what you're saying though is when I look to the past, I find the right thing. So here's an example.
I don't say that's not what I think at all. It's I think
wait,
what I think.
But it is what you're saying. You're describing the
other,
past. You're not using the fact that it's in the past as the reason why it's valid.
That's correct. That's
but
right.
You're finding your validity in the past. That's what I'm saying.
I'm finding the validity is other people who have this when other people are, so let's say Rush.
Yeah.
Do you call him the past? He has passed away now.
I mean, yeah, literally, right?
Well, can we make him not a part of the past since
Sure.
it was like just recently? If he would articulate the Second Amendment validation, I would say, and I've heard him, I think that I agree with that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to do with that it's in the past because he's in the present. It's the articulation wherever it's found, past, present.
So let me give evidence by giving you the opposite, showing you the opposite. Okay. So one of the things that I always react to, I have certain words that I get triggered by, pun intended, right? It's a joke. Because some people, even the whole concept of trigger warnings, we should dedicate some time to, right?
That would be a good one.
But I don't mean that I get upset, but rather that when I hear someone use certain words like problematic, I know they're listening to people that are in opposition to what I believe in, right? Because both sides have buzzwords.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so I realized that because I sort of keep a running list of these words and try to think, okay, is there a problem with the word or is it just a signal? There's nothing wrong with the word problematic.
Yes.
But it is a signal that people are using this lingo. I mean, I came up in that working in public ed and going through all these trainings about brown bodies and holding spaces and trauma informed, right? And it's like, all that stuff is interesting.
I hear what you're saying right now.
All right. So the term that I stumbled upon recently was outdated.
Okay.
Whenever someone says, as an argument for why a moral stand should be rejected, is because it's outdated.
Yes.
I now, and I probably always have, immediately say, oh, they're wrong probably, right? Because morals don't date they don't change.
Okay.
But to their view, and I think the reason is, and I don't even know that they know the reason, almost always when someone says something is outdated, they're talking about guns or sex.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which are two highly powerful topics.
Okay.
So in that sense, would you agree that if someone says this or that view of society is outdated, they're probably not correct? They're probably looking at it wrong. Would you agree with that?
Often, yeah. I mean, I think on an individual basis, there might be a worthwhile conversation if they could make the case. But
so I would argue that's a traditionalist view in the sense that it's timeless, right?
Well, I hear where you're going with that argument.
Because it's the opposite of progressive.
And you're right with that flow of logic, but that assumes the word outdated is healthy in all that has been invested in it. Because when it's only about sex or guns, then the word is being reinvested as a slur. It's not really the outdatedness that's at hand. It's that I don't like guns and I don't like what you think about sex.
Trick. It's a trick.
It's a trick.
Yeah, it's meant to embarrass you by thinking, it's similar to the fashion. It's meant to say you're wearing that. That's so.
Wait, it's not just similar. It's actually robbing all the investment of the fashion.
Right.
Because to be outdated in fashion is a sign of several bad things.
Correct.
So it's robbing that sign and putting it in these arguments.
But part of what I'm learning to do in my conversations about all things is to keep looking into my base assumptions.
Yeah.
And say, okay, when someone says it's outdated, for a long time, I would react and be like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's really relevant.
Yeah.
And by defending it in their terms,
in those terms,
I was accepting the premise that if something is outdated, that means it's bad.
I think that is a great point. Okay.
And that's because progressivism generally runs the conversation when it comes to popular culture.
Okay, I agree with you on that, but I think there's a reason. And I think the issue, so I actually think the issue of left to right is more about tearing down versus building up.
Yeah. But wouldn't that be tradition versus reinvention?
No, because the right builds up with new ideas. It's the right. I mean, the right banishes slavery. I know this is not popularly viewed.
I disagree. I don't think the right
I
banished
think
slavery.
it was the North in the Civil War.
Right.
It's Republicans. It's Lincoln.
It was
the Republican
Republicans. It
Party.
was Lincoln, but they were progressives.
Okay.
They were throwing out the tradition that
But
slavery.
see, then you're back to an adjectival use rather than.
But I'm saying the way
a
you look,
party
the
use.
frame by which you look at the world.
That's
What I'm describing,
okay,
not a
that's
political
what I
party.
get back here, and this is probably we can wrap it up, and you can get more involved in your other things.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're doing with this, I'm wanting to hear it as left and right as political parties, progressive left, conservative right. But I think instead what you're doing is you're adjectiving them because then you could take somebody on the right, you could say, well, he's really a progressive because he had a new idea.
Yeah.
And somebody on the left could be a conservative in these terms
Yep.
because he's trying to preserve, let's say, Clinton. You could say President Clinton was a conservative when he said, we want to make abortion legal, something
Safe
and rare.
and rare.
Legal,
Yeah.
safe, and rare.
Yeah.
Now, there's political
But
maneuvering
that was a
there.
concession.
It was brilliant, but you could say that was conservatism because it was the
He
law
was
of the land.
he was conceding ground to the conservatives because Newt Gingrich had taken over the House and he couldn't get anything done.
okay, and in conceding ground, he was trying to take it back by owning it
He's
himself.
He's trying to take the
But
conversation
he's doing
back.
it by expressing it in what would, in your idea, would be a conservative term.
Yeah.
And so, in that sense, you'd put him in that statement over there, right? On
I
the
think
right.
he would put himself in that statement. I don't think he believed that statement.
Oh, okay. So you have. Okay.
I think he was making it as an
I
appeal
agree with you.
to suburban moms.
But I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But we have to deal either with what's said and what it means there, or below and what's not said and what it means there. So
Right.
instead of getting below that, he didn't believe it. 'Cause I
Well,
agree
so
with you.
let me tell you where I put political parties.
But wait, get
Okay.
to my thing though. If you put Clinton,
Yeah.
he's a left person, but in that illustration, I think by your diagram, you'd say he was a conservative, at least in that.
I think that was a more conservative statement than he would normally make.
Yeah.
Because he was trying to concede ground to the conservatives, I imagine the perspective of somebody with teenagers
Okay, so
who
then-
thinks, I hate abortion, but what if my
Right.
daughter got
so
pregnant?
if you say it that way, he was more conservative in that statement. Then you have to say, as an individual, you might go back and forth on this chart.
Depending on the domain, correct.
What do you mean on the domain?
Okay, so you might go to work, and your work might be incredibly progressive if you're doing a tech startup.
Yes. Okay.
Now, that's going to bleed out. Who do we find running Twitter?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
A bunch of progressive
Okay.
politicals.
So when you say it like that, here's how I hear it. This is not political parties. Okay, when you just said, and maybe you want to do this now, where do you
Yeah.
put political parties on here? What I'm seeing now, this is an adjectival chart. I know that's upon which you put people and decisions and actions and parties, and
Yeah.
they can go both directions, up and down. And so you can't use this as a nomenclature for what a party is right now because they.
Well, I would put a party as like a cloud, which is partly why in this diagram,
Okay.
there's
all right.
dots.
Okay.
And so what happens politically, right? Obama is famous for this, that he gathers around him, what's the word? Oh, there's a term that political people use for it, and it's slipping my mind, but a coalition.
Okay.
Okay. And so in that coalition, you're going to have a lot of people in the Black community and maybe the Latino community, but you're also going to have the traditional liberals. But he gathered, and also he was very well spoken. He was very persuasive.
Yeah.
And so some of the middle class folks, so
have
he's
friends who
gathering
voted
up
for him.
people
Yeah.
from all these different perspectives.
Yeah.
And the goal of a good politician is to expand the size of people who say, I'm with that guy, right?
I'm with her. You mean?
Yeah, whoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice one. Okay, so, but in the most extreme corners, what I see happening is that the political parties are going to the extremes. So
Okay, so wait, let me restate that. In general, they're going to the extremes. So, but that doesn't
well, if
mean,
you took
let's
if you took the
Democrat-
actual stated views of the Democrat and Republican parties, what you'd find is that the Republicans are holding pretty close. You've got the Mitt Romney Republicans, which are conservative and more authoritarian. They want the establishment to maintain power. They don't want change, but they also don't want a bunch of rednecks taking over, right? So if rednecks are in the bottom corner, in the like leave me alone conservatives.
Okay, let's get to your terms in just a second. Let me ask
Okay.
another question though before you get to those rednecks, the four corners. If I'm hearing you right, what I'm going to make a statement, then you tell me if I've heard you right.
Okay.
When the Supreme Court decides to say this is not a federal constitutional right for an abortion, I know it was freaked out. They take it away. That's not what they did. They put it to the states. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
The left, no, I'm not going to use left. I'm just going to registered Democrats, okay?
Yep.
Said this is awful, for whatever reasons, but the only one I'm interested in the moment is they undid the law of the land. And in that...
You're saying that was the view or no?
No, I'm saying that's what... Yes, on the Democrats, one of their arguments was this. This has been law since 1972. You are radically changing what we've come to live with.
Right.
And that, in your terms, I'm saying that's conservative upholding the tradition of the past. Am I hearing you right if I made that statement?
Well, I think that was their effort.
They're being, on this chart, conservative.
But so everybody, you have to hear politicians that they're always doing two things. They're trying to speak to their own people in a language that they understand according to their values, but they're trying to teach those people the argument to go be persuasive at Thanksgiving dinner, right? Mm-hmm. And so they will put their arguments in terms that the other side would find convincing, perhaps. So a progressive might speak or argue for their stuff in conservative terms, but only as an accusation against the conservatives that they're not holding to their own values.
Okay, so then I use my illustration right. You would say, yes, they were functioning, they're a Democrat, but they were functioning with conservative perspectives as you've defined them. Now you're saying their motivation is
but
to
it's
appeal
conservative.
To their side.
It's a conservatism of 50 years. So
I understand.
You can't be a traditionalist in 50 years when there's 2,000 years of tradition.
That's not fair because you said the right uses Reagan. That's less than 50 years.
Right, but what I'm saying is the right loves to look back for its heroes.
Right.
Whereas the left doesn't.
Okay, so left and right, you don't have those words on here.
Yeah, but I mean,
Republican
you just
or Democrat.
hold up your left hand, it makes an L.
Yeah. Left hand is an L. That's funny.
So what I would say is, right, traditionally you've got liberal and conservative, but you also have, and the colors are backward here, and I think the colors are, the red and the blue. In our political maps, the red and the blue are wrong. You know, like red states and blue states.
Oh, I see.
But I've got them reversed, and here's why.
Communism?
Because communists are reds.
I know.
But the hard part is the rednecks are reds too. Yeah. So, but
that's only because we were at the end of the Cold War, you and I, when we were kids. That's what we got Rocky movies.
The Cold War is here and now. Because the communists are running our state.
I know.
Every day.
I know. I agree.
But
wait, even when you say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no. Go ahead. Okay. What's your four things there? What's the four corners?
So a libertarian progressive is someone who wants to reinvent, and morals is always a great way to measure this, right? They want to reinvent morality.
Here's the dilemma. I think you got to come up with new words, and here's why.
Which words are you struggling with?
All those four in white.
The progressive, authoritarian, libertarian, conservative?
Yeah, only authoritarian would be fine, I think. That one's okay. But the other, it's because they're used as political group names.
But that's what the goal of this is, to explain politics.
Yeah, but I'm having a hard time. When you say it, I'm having to hear it, retranslate it in what you mean by it, because I want to go to a political name, what it means. And that's not what you're doing it by.
Well, so here's part of the struggle. Is the word conservative, right? I think that's maybe a little harder because I'm trying to double that up.
On here.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an example. I'm a progressive when it comes to how church should be organized.
Yeah. So just pause it right there. That's the dilemma, because you're not a progressive in the liberal terms. I mean, not in the political terms of today.
Yeah. Right. I'm not progressive in anything.
In any of what is being held up by the progressives, which are on the left.
Yeah.
So there's a personality. Using a word to describe yourself, of which in the normal use nobody would use that word of you.
I don't think that's true though. I think progressive and conservative could be applied to any realm of life.
Okay, I agree with you, but if somebody used that word of you, they would have to have put a lot of thought into it and a lot of work to look past. Yeah, nobody's going to put you with.
If someone says, is Luke very open to new ideas, or does he always want to do things the way they've been done?
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when the word progressive is used today, that meaning is not what's the most prominent meaning.
Right, but conservative you would.
Conservative is still
because you've got conservative investors, you've got conservative church members,
it's still
you've got
an
conservative
adjective,
political people.
But the word progressive is being taken out of its adjectival use and its prominent. We could probably
Okay,
do
but
Google searches on this. If you Google
yeah,
search
yeah,
these
yeah.
words as individuals, they give sometimes definition 1, definition 2, definition 3.
Yeah.
That's my concern is I'm having to hear you, and my
But so
first
maybe
definitions I
because
have
you're
to say,
stuck
no,
on the
that's
concept
not
of
what he's talking about.
progressive is the natural opposite of conservative. Would you agree with that?
Yes, both in its political and in your
Just in general
adjectival
use. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because part of the reason
Yes.
I framed it this way is looking at the idea of, because I was playing with what does it mean to be conservative, right? Like, okay, I'm a traditional conservative in the sense of like, I don't think gay marriage is actually marriage, right? I don't think abortion should be, I think it's murder. Not just like, oh, it should be safe, legal, and rare. It should be illegal and people should be punished, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a human
When
baby.
you take a life,
Right.
you need to pay
Okay.
a price.
So in that sense, I'm very traditional, very conservative, but I find the word conservative being used everywhere. Like I was saying, when you look at
You're
your
right.
401k, do you want to have a conservative
Approach.
or maybe aggressive? Maybe I think in investing, they say, do you want to be conservative or aggressive? It's really safety versus risk. That's the difference. And so,
I think those two side words should be past and future
yeah.
orientation.
But if I'm trying to put it into language and say, here's where I think our America's political frame is going. Like what I would say here is that this thing is spiraling. That what's happening is traditionally we were like back and forth. You know, you had Carter and then you had Reagan and then you had Bush first and then Clinton and it goes back and forth. But what's happening is we're going more authoritarian, less authoritarian, more authoritarian, and it's going in a spiral out. And that's how you rip things apart.
Okay, I agree with you on that. I think,
And
that's
I
a good
actually,
point.
I would still put Trump down here. People see the accusation of the communists was that Trump is a fascist.
Okay, all right. Let's pause there before you do that. Tell
Okay.
us the 4 words then.
Yeah, yeah. So
Say
a
why
fascist,
you put them where they are.
a fascist and communist are both authoritarian. Okay.
Okay.
In the sense
Slow
that they're
down,
very
let me
group.
Slow down. A fascist and communist, both
Yeah.
authoritarian. Okay.
And they're group identity
But
focused.
tell me what the difference is between them first.
Right. So a
Oh,
communist.
not in your terms. Do it. So like
Well, it has to. I mean,
Hitler
it's
is
my-
a fascist.
Hitler's a
but
fascist.
Stalin is a communist.
Correct. Yeah.
What's the difference between Hitler and Stalin?
The
That
difference
makes-
is, like you said, past and future. So what Stalin says, and I don't know that Stalin believed this because he was just a pure authoritarian by the end, right? Just kill all my opponents and take over everything, as was Hitler.
So
The
that's not
ideals
how I
fade
would've
away.
said it.
But
I
what I'm
would've-
saying is, what communist says is we've got to take over so that we can create the utopian future. We've got to destroy the past to build this perfect future.
But wouldn't you say fascism?
What fascism says-
But Hitler said the same thing.
No.
Hitler, yes,
Hitler
wanted
said, we're the Third Reich. We're the Third Reign. We're Roman Empire coming reborn.
Yeah, but he wanted to take money from somewhere, and his goal was to make the superiority of the German race
Yeah,
as the supreme on the planet.
right.
And second, he wanted them to be the best art people in the world. That was his 2 biggest things.
Okay.
So to me, that as a fascist, he went to authoritarianism to accomplish that end.
Right.
The difference I see with Stalin is he went to authoritarianism, but it wasn't necessarily to an end. It was complete redistribution of wealth.
Yes.
It had a philosophy that said you can't have an exceeding person and a less. We have to take from those who have, give to those who don't, and level them out, except for those of us who are in control and run.
Yeah.
things.
So I mean,
So
communism.
that's how I would say that there's a communist and a fascist because
But
they were
so
very
originally,
similar.
Marxism's frame, the moral frame Marxism brings, is what you're describing, financial. But even now, what we would call, it's being called now neo-Marxism. It doesn't use money anymore as its defining moral. It's sexual identity and
I
racial
know,
identity.
I know.
Right. But it's still the same narrative of the past is oppressive, and the future is ideal. If only we can gain
See,
power.
I don't see that. That's what I maybe. I mean, I'm not a pro on. Stalin,
Whereas
but I don't see
the
him
way I would
looking at
describe
the
a fascist is the past is ideal. We need to take over to put the past back in place and to destroy our,
Yeah, but-
our historic
so if
enemies.
Hitler was a fascist. He wasn't trying to put the past back in place. Well, I guess there was.
He
an
was. He
element.
was to the glory of the German
Teutonic-
people.
Yes, you're right on that. The Teutonic race had a preeminent time for a while.
And fascism, I mean, what does fascism get called most common now is connected with nationalism, right? Because your nation is your identity group. And the more you're large, so you've got large identity groups. I mean, what's
Okay,
bigger
I
than...
blanked out on that one because I was thinking about Putin.
Okay.
Because you would say...
But Putin's a nationalist too, right?
Putin would
Nationalism
be a
always gets
fascist,
connected to
because
fascism.
he is trying to get the glory of Russia back, the Tsars.
That's right.
That's what he liked to do, late 1800s, get that land back,
Yep.
and its prominence, more than the economic redistribution of his
Correct.
forebears of Lenin.
Putin is not a communist.
Right.
Yeah, he's a fascist.
He's a socialist.
Well, he's an
capitalist.
authoritarian conservative.
Right.
That's what I would say. And so at the most extreme end of that range is fascists. Now, I wouldn't say Putin's a fascist pure and simple, but he's definitely authoritarian. He's definitely conservative, right? Oh, so...
Okay, so fascist is your combo of authority. Okay, I don't think anyone would disagree. Authoritarian, the communist fascists, they move up that authoritarian level.
Yeah.
On the right, what you're saying is the one who looks to the past, I want it the way it was, becomes a fascist when he uses authority.
Correct.
On the left,
And the larger the group identity becomes in their sense of self.
Say that again.
So the larger your group identity is prominent in your sense of being,
like the Hitler Youth,
or like the critical race theory puts your race, critical gender theory, or now it's commonly just called.
But then are you saying right now then the critical race theory, the use of it is more fascist and conservative then?
No. It's more authoritarian. So all the authoritarians have group identity as the centerpiece, whether you're in the bourgeoisie over here, right, and the workers of the world unite, or that we need to, for the glory of the German people.
Okay.
Versus, if you're a redneck, leave me alone. If you're a hippie, leave me alone.
If back up to the top two.
Yeah.
On the fascist, the group were able to be persuaded in on board. On the left, the group definitely were not. Nobody wanted what Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin were doing. No people wanted it. Just the leaders.
Just the Bolsheviks.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Right. But
over there.
But
on
even
fascists,
still,
the people
everything they
"I'm in."
said was that it was the people.
I know,
were doing it for the people.
But it wasn't true.
But that's what authoritarians always say. What percent
Well,
of
no, that's not
what
true.
percent of Germans were Nazis?
right. Well, I don't know, but the Hitler
25 or less. 30%
youth,
maybe.
Yeah. You're right.
And then 30% is willing to sit around and watch.
Yeah.
While the last third gets slaughtered.
Okay. All right. Do your bottom two.
Well,
Hippies, rednecks.
Yeah. So at the bottom end of
you've got
libertarian,
red should be in what? How many places?
I know you could put a stack vertically of identity groups, right? Where it's you, and then as it goes
do your
up,
hippies and rednecks first.
Yeah,
Then
I'm
stack the
trying.
groups. Okay.
So at the bottom, the most individualistic is yourself alone. Okay. But then it's your family. It's maybe your small town or your neighborhood, your community, your sports team, your state, and it climbs up and up. Okay. So down at the bottom of the most leave me alone people on the conservative end are the rednecks. They see the past as ideal. And on the progressive end are the hippies, that they want to reinvent things.
I have no fundamental pushback or question about that.
So here's an interesting thing I discovered, okay? I was trying to put our current, and I first made this, like you said, I think a year or two ago. It was during COVID. I made a video about it. Where does political correctness go? And I had to say that it actually lands here. And corporations are here too. They're in the conservative. They want things to be done the way they've always been.
See, I'm not going to...
So here's my argument for that, right?
Pushback to that.
So the corporations right now are, many of them going woke, right? And they're saying you need to get rid of your whiteness, right? I think as the Coke training,
Which
Coca-Cola was training their staff saying...
Yeah.
Okay, so you could say that's progressive, and I agree, but it's also the establishment.
That's what I would say.
Right, but it's also the establishment view.
I hear you on that.
So once the progressives have taken over to be establishment, then the corporations get on board.
Okay, but wait.
Because they want the safe route. That's the conservative way to think.
So if I were to restate what you said, once the progressives take over, I think I would say what your chart means then is they become the conservatives.
That's right. Once communists get into power, they become fascists because all authoritarians in power are the same.
So this is what
they're having to preserve their power.
This is why I think you should get different words, because you have the dilemma with using words that apply to current day parties.
Yeah.
Is that the current day parties are a something. This has flexibility. An individual throughout a 20-year period could be all over on this map as an individual.
Yeah.
But we might say he's a Democrat the whole time or a Republican the whole time.
But
you could do a map
over time and see the movement of the of the
But
Republicans
wait,
and the
it's
conservative
relative
Democrats.
too. Yes, I agree. Okay, so maybe this, I don't know if this is an illustration or not of that. It's been said many times, but Kennedy was a liberal, a Democrat in his
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
If his policies were expressed today, he would be on the right, well past the center of the right. And this
yeah.
gets the Musk thing. The meme you saw is a meme, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I used to be left of center, and then 10 years later is this. I'm way right of center now because center moved.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing in this here is since you're using this adjectively, this moves in a sense relative to center. So your
Well,
progressives
sort of.
who
I
are
don't. I
left,
think America has moved. So I would say what you're describing is that America was actually like over here, and at the founding, I would argue we were way down there, and America has been moving in that direction, at an accelerated rate in the last 50 years, 60 years.
no, I don't like. Here's why I don't like that. So progressives, when you said they take over a corporation, let's say, right? A
Yeah.
corporation, I agree with you. They are
They want safety.
tradition, safety, the past, conservative. That's how you make money, a
Right.
little bit at a time, and you build something that lasts 100 years.
Okay.
A progressive, okay, future, it doesn't matter, but let's just
Well, that's
say,
an interesting way you said that, though, because that is not how the big, most powerful companies have made their fortunes in the last 20 years.
No,
it's through
it's
tech
changed
startups.
in the last 20 years.
It's $1 billion
But that's
company
not
in 10
how
minutes.
It was.
But that would make sense why they wouldn't be conservative in their views, right? But what's the most
That's a good
conservative social media?
Facebook, right?
Probably Facebook, because
Yeah, it's got
its
so many
demographic
years.
is older.
Yeah.
They have to play it safe,
Yeah,
and they've been
yeah.
around the longest.
Yeah, but see when I call this not relative, because I don't mean that can only sometimes be heard in a negative way, but it has movement oriented. So a
Yeah.
person who is diversity, equity, inclusion, or you said critical race.
Yeah.
Everybody recognizes today that a person advocating for that is in this camp called progressives.
Mm-hmm.
Once they take over by your chart, they become a conservative on your chart.
Yeah.
And that's a problem in the mind because it's hard to track with that. It's hard to keep.
But didn't you ask yourself in the last 2 years what happened to our politics? All the people
No,
we
wait a
said
minute,
were
no.
liberal are now suddenly acting conservative and wanting everyone to follow the rules.
No, but that doesn't apply.
And that
here.
was constantly
So,
shocking me.
Yes, so this is Musk. We'll just use him
Okay.
because the right is liking him, right?
Yeah. Right.
Conservatives are liking him. He's not a conservative.
No. But he's a libertarian.
But wait,
He's
he
more
is
focused
a
on freedom.
conservative in your chart.
No, I don't think he is. He's just not a communist.
He's going into. He's just not a communist.
Because at this point, with communists,
He's going into Twitter.
fascists are the same way.
He bought Twitter.
If you're not
his
with us, you're our
Wait,
enemy.
He bought Twitter with one express purpose.
Yeah.
If we don't change something, the world's going to die.
Yeah.
That's conservatism. We lost something that if we don't
Yeah.
get it back, we're over
Right.
with. According to this, that's conservative.
And that's why the conservatives are happy.
I know,
Yeah.
but the reality is he's not a conservative.
Because you can't be a conservative in personality. Because conservative and Democrat is largely influenced by
Yeah.
personality.
Yeah.
It's called openness to an experience, and it's an immutable trait. That's why if you go to churches, like growing up in charismatic churches, openness and extroversion were significant character traits preached
Yeah.
from the pulpit, right? And the churches that we go to now are the other way. They're far more conservative, and so new ideas are not always. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So my dilemma is still, even after 30 minutes, I'm feeling that I have to hear you, and in order to understand you, get out of what I immediately hear,
Right.
get over to what you mean by it, and then do the work to hear you again.
Okay.
And so I'm still going to advocate that a different term has to happen for that, especially the left-right.
For progressive and
Yeah,
conservative.
because it's too hard. I'm having a hard time, and I'm not that bad at mental gymnastics.
No, you're not. So I would think the reason I did those is because that was my starting point.
Yeah,
Was to say in the old days it was conservatives and liberals, right?
yeah.
And liberal sort of fits down here in
I
the
think
sense
you're
of
onto
libertarian.
something here. I'll say
And
this.
so I was struggling for any other word that could even
I
work.
think you're onto something as a way to understand movement
Yeah.
and
yeah.
what drives
Okay.
movement. But I think the words can't be tied to current things because it's too hard to hear. It's too hard. I mean, you still don't have me when you talk about the progressives taking over and becoming conservatives. I just can't. I can't embrace that because I'm working with definitions that you don't, that are not a part of your chart. You
But
don't mean it that
what
way.
I'm saying is they don't become they trying to conserve the status quo.
I know.
Even though they're not looking to the.
I think I hear what you're saying.
They've erased the
it's
past.
It's just too hard to do it. Maybe you're able to do it, but I'm having difficulty.
Well, I've been playing with it for a while.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
true.
It's all
but
in my frame.
Also, you and I share a little bit of a gift or bent or proclivity for seeing what's behind things, and
Right.
maybe a little more abstract about things, right?
Well, okay.
then
So
we
my
have
challenge
our
is to
unique-
find me a better word, because I
will
wrestled with
think
words
about
on
it.
that
Yeah,
one
yeah,
for a
yeah.
while.
I'll think about it.
When I first made it, it was it was liberal and conservative.
Yeah,
And it was
that
about
won't
safety
work
versus
either.
freedom.
Yeah,
Because
my
it is.
first stab would be your past and future.
But here's the reason I would go with it, and past and future might work too. What I was saying, what I like to say, and I don't remember where
Because
I
see,
stole
I
this from
want
somewhere.
a progressive who is advocating for critical race theory, takes over a corporation, and now they can function differently. I still want to call them a progressive, no matter how much power and how they wield power. See what I'm
Yes,
saying?
but the
I agree
purpose
with
of a
you, they
frame like
change.
this, to me, the reason I want a frame like this is to try to understand why people are acting the way they are.
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
so what I was seeing in
Yeah,
COVID
I
was
hear
all
you.
of these progressives suddenly acting conservative.
and maybe here's your thing with Greenwald says this. I don't know if you ever read Greenwald.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald, sure.
Greenwald, saying the people that objected to the CIA and its power and the wars in Vietnam, now they're the biggest supporters of war and a secret state of government spying on everybody.
Right.
What in the blankety blank has happened?
What happened is the communists came into power and turned into fascists.
So
That's what
I
happened.
think you're onto something. I just think the language has to be such that it's not. I'm having a hard time.
Because you associate those words with so many
it's almost
loaded
impossible
things.
to get out of those words.
Yeah.
In the investment, and I think it has a fair commonality in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to hear you use them differently, and I think it's fair, but it's hard.
Okay.
It's hard.
All right, we gotta jump.
Yeah, we got to jump.
You, I don't
What
know.
else do we want to do here?
I don't know how many of these things we
Let
actually
me-
talked about.
We're at 55. Let me just do this. Let me ask one. Oh, do we want to? We don't want to do your AI thing. I have a
No,
technology-
AI would be fun.
Okay, well but we're running out of time here. So let me lead it with a question.
Okay.
That can be something I wanted to say, and then it can lead into something you wanted to say. I think.
Ooh, okay.
I think they'll be connected.
Yeah.
My question is: does technology give elites powers like the spirits?
All right, you got to explain that to
The
me.
spirits being. See, we haven't talked about this, so if somebody's listening in, that's a whole conversation. But suffice it for a elevator, the scriptures talk about spirits are in the world, and there's good spirits that God made, and there are spirits that have
the
rebelled.
disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. Is that what you're talking about right now?
I'm not going there, though we will at some point. I'm confident.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a realm of life beyond what we see.
Okay.
You could say, and there's a family that God created before humanity was created, and these are the angelic beings. And there is a rebellion. There was a rebellion, and some of them lived to destroy. Okay, so there's evil spirits and there's good spirits. So the realm of spirits. The reason I call it that is
the realm of
because
spirits. It sounds so much cooler than the spirit realm. I don't know if it's just because it's a new way to go in.
well, so from a Christian perspective, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers.
Yeah.
Now, so we believe as a part of our worldview that there's these entities that have personhood, they have existential existence. They are a something.
They're real beings.
They're beings, and we know even some of them have names.
Yeah.
So they have a self-identity. They're not just the force be with you, right? They're not an unpersonalized.
Well, and it's not like gravity.
It's not like gravity.
It's
That's
not.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
So these beings we know are a part of things. Now that's all I'm going to say for the moment. But what we do know is from a Bible perspective is that these beings exercise an influence, that our real war is with them.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when you and I, let's say we get into a heated exchange, we really get upset with one another, we disagree, or our neighbor, what that's meaning is to say, don't treat that person like the utter enemy. Now, you may have a temporary enemy that you have to resolve something with, but they're your ally in the long run. The real enemy is another force behind animating this, whether it's in you or him, right? It doesn't. I mean, that's not the point. The point is this is your real enemy, not your brother, right?
Okay.
Even not your neighbor. So, in that term, they have powers then that we don't possess. They're invisible. We talked about invisibility the other day versus flying. They're invisible. They have a strength that it's hard for us to understand what it means. They have historic theology has talked about the strength and intellect that spirits have that exceed humanity's.
Would you say that a Christian filled with the Spirit of God, could stand against that?
Yes, and I don't want to get into that subject, but yet the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't undo that they're an adversary.
But you're talking about
strength.
technology.
So what I'm wanting to make the leap is this. At a Christian level, we recognize that the Spirit of God comes into the life of somebody who put their faith in Jesus, and there's an empowerment of that individual to combat at that other level spiritual forces.
Okay.
And then we'll just leave it at that and not talk about all the different ways that combat can.
So we're not going to get into exorcisms.
No, exactly. Now, once we have that supposition, we recognize an enemy that we can't see, that operates at a level we don't understand, has access to information we don't know. We become convinced, we don't believe, almost no Christian believes, that they can read your mind. But we also think there's access to, we're not exactly sure the limitation that there is, and it's more than we would like. Like, I know certain things about
you're saying these spiritual beings can't read your mind.
Right. They can't read your mind.
Because it talks about Jesus being able to read people's thoughts and knowing what's...
Well, okay, we'll have to talk about that. There is something there, but it's not clear if that was him or given to him.
Right.
Prophetically. So we know that God knows all things.
Yeah.
But we don't know... Okay, what we don't know, what nobody is willing to say is that the angels, fallen or unfallen, are omniscient like God and know everything. So they have a limitation.
Yeah,
but
I think everybody agrees on that.
They know more than us. Yeah. So they're more and less.
Well, if they're ancient beings, right, who've been around for thousands of years, you're going to know a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
And at levels that we probably don't even understand. The spiritual... What we don't even know what spiritual access means to our physical world, except that they seem to be able to enter our world and leave our world. So
dimensions,
dimensions,
portals.
Okay, but my point then is
rings of power.
I've several times thought to myself, I want to get a different email. I have a Gmail account.
Yeah,
I believe they have a computer program that collects the words.
Oh, you don't have to believe it. They've stated it.
I'm unimportant.
Yeah. It's well known. Sure.
But if I started one of two things, saying certain words, I'd rise in importance.
Yeah.
And number two, if I had a lot of people listening to me.
That's the big one.
So, but right now I'm unimportant, but I still think they have me on file, so to speak.
Yeah, you're in a category.
We're being recorded by phones. I think I have my phone's microphones turned off. I don't think that matters. I think it's still caught.
Correct.
Now, at times that I've thought, I don't want to use Gmail.
Yeah.
You know, the guys who said, it's free, that means you're the product.
Yeah.
Right. But then I've thought about looking for something else. But then I thought, wait a minute now. It's upsetting to me. It makes me maybe a little frightened, maybe a little angry, maybe a little resistant oriented. But then I realized one day, wait a minute now. They haven't achieved the level of the spirits.
Okay. So some of the lore around the spirits and their interaction with people and corrupting them, right? So there's a lot of lore in addition to the Bible, but also in the Bible, of these spirit beings corrupting humanity.
Yes.
And some of that story includes the introduction of technology in exchange for like their women. Do you know the story?
Yes, I do know the story. And
so what I'm trying to say though is simply that technology is interlaced on some level with how they do things.
There is an argument to be made from Scripture that technology is not always a good thing presented in the way we assume as people.
Sure.
That its introduction in Scripture is almost always? I don't know how strong a language you use, but it's in conjunction with the rise of evil.
Well, because
so this gets to my question.
A lot of technology, the root of it is look at the power we can achieve.
That's exactly what I'm getting
at. And the pursuit of power and domination is always corrupt.
So is technology, but then back to my question.
Yeah.
Does technology give elites powers like the spirits?
Or is the technology originating from those same spirits?
I think that, yes.
That's almost intertwined in your question, right?
Okay, it could be. It's another layer deep. It's one more down.
Okay, so let me say this. I could see why your question, the way you're asking it from a modern frame, would be asked in reverse if you had the perspective of an ancient person who might say these technologies come from Satan.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you jumped right to Satan on that one.
Well, and it's maybe not Satan himself, but
Okay,
generically.
so here's the dilemma. Here's my reluctance. I hear what you're saying, but my reluctance to have said it that way is this.
Yeah.
I don't. It's like guns. I don't believe guns cause violence. I think it's people, and they use
Yeah.
a gun. It's a weapon. If you take away, you got to get rid of knives. Now they're finding the deaths with screwdrivers and hammers are on the rise.
In the UK, yeah.
So you got to get rid. It becomes ad absurdum. That's not right. I don't know.
Well, okay. So the way I've said it in the past is,
So
if
technology.
the tree is rotten, the fruit will be rotten.
That's right.
You can't change a tree by going around and picking all the fruit off and
That's
saying, "Look,
correct.
the fruit's gone."
But what I was saying with technology is guns are neutral. It's people.
Guns are morally neutral.
Morally neutral. And I want to say the
But
same
if you
about
have an atomic bomb, your capacity for evil is increased.
yes,
1,000-fold,
so the,
right?
the,
A million-fold.
the morally neutral tool can be big or little
Yeah.
and can make your propensity for evil as a person more successful or less successful.
Yeah.
So that's where I want to get my first inquiry is, does technology, is it being used by the elites in order as a morally neutral thing to facilitate becoming more like spirits? Because the technology
So are you
today-
saying there's a religious impulse driving the pursuit of technology?
that is a good question. I wasn't, but I think that's
Because I would argue that a lot of the tech folks, people pursuing technology, are sort of not as religious as traditionally.
yes, you're
minded
right.
people.
I agree with you. But
So they're filling
we
in that hole
also-
with tech.
yes, when you say that whole, that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Because my presupposition is that everyone has a religious bent, whether they acknowledge it or not, because we're
Right.
made by
I would
God.
agree with that.
And so they may not realize what they're doing, but I would say in two fronts. Number one, the vast desire to do something new and to make something is actually from God. They don't realize it. To
Yeah.
build and create.
He's the creator of all
explore.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're sub-creators.
Mm-hmm.
And when they create and the tech people build something new, they are, in my opinion, honoring how God made us. They don't say that or think that, but they're driven to, and they get delight in it.
Mm-hmm.
And those are actually good things.
Sure.
But then the corruption is, I think in some of them, there's a fascination, proclivity, or bent towards things that control other people,
Yeah.
that give I mean, the whole thing with the lawsuit. Did you see the suit with the vacuum cleaner? I know you showed me
With
your
the
vacuum
what?
cleaner the other day.
No.
The vacuum cleaner in the house.
Like the robot vacuums?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of those.
I know. And so what happened recently is they uploaded photos against the user's will, and it was this lady using the bathroom.
Oh my goodness.
And her pictures of her using the
her
bathroom.
vacuum cleaner took pictures of her. Yeah.
Well, the vacuum cleaners are taking pictures constantly.
Sure.
And they're sending the info up. So all these tech things are what would traditionally, and not in your use earlier traditionally, but historically have been things that are beyond human powers. The things that we had before, I needed to be present to be able to get a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Now with tech, I can gain things almost like by magic, invisibly. Information, understanding, algorithms, predictions, and that's why I think it works into your AI in schools. They
Yeah.
can actually.
I mean, I think you
That's
could make
closer
that
to
argument.
spirits.
You could make that argument from, classrooms. And I read a neat article once about teaching, and every new technology that was touted as going to revolutionize the classroom.
Yeah.
And the first one was radio, because we wouldn't even need teachers now. We'll just turn on the radio,
Yeah.
right? And that was going to revolutionize education. And now it's every 10 minutes there's something new that somebody's selling with that.
Yeah. That's
Tagline.
the other religious impulse, by the way. I forgot to say it. The savior of science. Science as a savior.
Yeah. But I mean, I saw that's another real one. I saw somebody making the argument where they were showing, cars in the past, cars now, phones in the past, phones now, classrooms in the past, classrooms now. Look, they're the same. How bad is this, right? But it's sort of that outdated argument. It's bad because it's outdated. And so I automatically throw it out if that's the way that you make the argument, Because when you see a picture of a classroom, whether it's desks or chairs or beanbags, it's kids getting taught by a person.
Yes.
And so what's outdated about that?
Yes.
It would be like taking a picture of a family and saying, look at families in the past, families now, how outdated.
And so
like, say,
I don't think, getting back to your other point, I don't think that that's an argument from the past or a conservative argument. I think what you're appealing to, and I agree with, we're arguing from a made by God a certain way.
Well, I think there's...
So our kids are not made to learn by some ethereal voice. They're made to learn
so
in
what's going to happen
with other
when...
people.
What's going to happen when, and I would say there's somebody probably doing this right now, that you can have an AI voiced teacher having as real of a conversation with a kid as you are.
I asked a professor, the guy who gave me those books, the engineering professor.
Yeah.
And online things. And we talked about it a bit, and I came away with this conclusion, and because he didn't say anything to persuade me differently.
Okay.
But that online schooling is not going to survive. It will never disappear.
Correct.
But it will not become the new way to do it.
No.
Because we're made by God to be with other people.
Yeah, that's right. And education is inherently, it's
Learning
an extension
from a
of
person.
parenting.
That's exactly right.
You're not
It's
going
the
to
same
remote
dynamic.
parent effectively.
That's right. You can't.
It's
you
like,
can't.
yeah. Well, and that's why
It's too lonely. People
fall in love on the internet all the time.
Now that's an interesting.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's sort of what we're saying is that at its core, a relationship can be long distance, but it can't be a healthy and long-term
Okay, I was just
committed
going to
relationship.
say, you're right. They do fall in love, but I think the success rate is really low.
Well, and the depth you can achieve is also really limited.
Did you ever see? I didn't even see it, but I really wanted to, but I didn't take the time. The movie, I think it was called Her.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did you see it?
Oh yeah.
Was it intriguing?
It was. I mean, it was an interesting future. It was a very idyllic future, actually, where the phones are just a conversation you have with what sounds like another human being.
Yeah.
And so the main character, his job is to write greeting cards, but what he does is he sits at a computer that looks like a picture frame, and he just talks to it.
Yeah.
And then people start falling in love with their phones.
Yeah.
And the story begins
the
where it's like
person that's
the
talking
new
back.
And it's
right?
and it's Scarlett Johansson and her sultry voice and she's talking like so in the beginning he updates his phone to the new OS, okay? And then it says update complete, and then she just goes, "Hey." And then he says, "Hi." And then they just start talking.
Yeah.
Like you just met a new person who's
Yeah.
open and honest and willing to hear you and not judgmental.
Yeah.
It's as if your dog could talk to you, right?
Yeah.
And all the good traits that people appreciate about their pets.
So the reason I didn't end up watching it and take the time to watch it, I should say, is because I felt like it would be painful to watch and I would have significant disagreement and it would be upsetting. Because the disagreements would be so profound that I could see this would be where people think we're going, and I would have an absolute no. That will not
the
be.
movie was not an argument in favor.
Oh, it wasn't.
No,
I expected that.
It was
would be.
just simply an expression of
observation?
expectation, with all of the terrible consequences. I mean, it was showing, how many marriages were splitting up because so and so was having an affair with the AI on their phone, and like I'm in love with him now.
So did they portray the man as being satisfied with the relationship?
No.
Oh,
Well, sort of. He was sort of a lonely character generally. So.
So companionship. It met some level of companionship.
Yeah, like
even
you would
if it
say,
wasn't-
an internet relationship could.
or a dog.
Yeah, I mean, a dog
So I have
with
this
the
theory.
adult complexities that dogs don't bring into the picture of like the sexual dynamic of a relationship. and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
but your internet person's not bringing that dynamic either.
Well, the movie goes weird.
Does it really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness, I don't know. Okay, that's interesting. I should watch it but okay. So how does that overlap at all with what you were think about AI?
It does in some sense because teachers have always struggled with the Luddite tendency, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so here's what I've been playing with. So the AI, for those of you who don't know, AI has gotten to the point where
Well, say Luddite if you're gonna do for those.
Oh,
of you
what
who
does
don't know.
Luddite mean? Okay, you can go look that one up if you want to know. But there's a company called
It's a person who
OpenAI
hates technology.
and wants to destroy it, even
Yeah,
right?
all
Traditionally, okay. So a company called OpenAI has put out a chat program in which you type questions and have a conversation. But it's basically combing the internet in the way that you would think Google does, and then replying to you in a format of conversation or maybe in whatever format you want it to. So we were playing with it as a school
And
project.
whatever format you want it to, does that mean you would have some algorithmic control over how you want it to talk to you? Is that what you mean by that?
No, not quite.
Okay.
So here's what I mean. We put in the question, write a poem about chickens in the style of William Shakespeare.
Okay.
And it immediately did.
Interesting.
And it was incredibly good. I mean, as good as it could be, right? A poem about chickens, but hilarious and in iambic pentameter in the form of a sonnet.
No problem.
In
with
5
that.
seconds.
Insightful?
Creative. Generic. No, it was, well, creative could be argued.
Beauty?
I don't know. We didn't look at it too deeply, right?
Yeah.
But what it's getting used, so the way I've heard friends talk about it who work in tech was like, okay, if I need this data point, and I know it's out on the internet, right? I need the population or the water usage of each municipality in Oregon.
Yeah.
I can just ask this thing to do it, and it will scour the internet and bring me the data.
Okay.
Then I can say, hey, make me a program that presents that data in a graph and updates every week. And then it will do that. It'll write the program in computer language.
No, I have no objection so far.
There's people's full-time job to do this, right? And now it's getting replaced by 5 seconds on this program.
I have personally no problem with this.
Okay, so we sat down, and one of my students is working on an essay. He read the Homer's Iliad.
Here I'm going to have some problems.
And so we said, okay, you're working on this essay. You're really struggling. Student who I won't name.
Yeah.
Ask it to write your essay for you.
Well, that's a whole other set of...
And it did in seconds.
Yeah.
Right. So then he was having fun. So he said, write me it's supposed to be like a 5-page essay, right? So write me a 5,000-page essay he wrote in the Iliad. And then it explained to him why it couldn't do that. Because the Iliad is such a monumental work of Western fiction that its themes are so deep and rich, and it would take too much for what the program can handle. And I mean, we could pull it up and play with it right now. You have to log in and give it your email address and stuff. So then I found someone else posted that you could ask the Chat GPT is what it's called, the OpenAI, to write you a script. You could say, hey, write me a script on how to become an engineer, right? Or how to become a pilot. Actually, one of my students did this.
Okay.
Like, what do I need to do to become a pilot? Give me steps. Then you take that and you go to another AI program that some other companies created and put it in as the script for a video. And then it creates a fake human face that looks real and is talking the words you put in, saying them. Behind it or in front of it are like the words, closed captioning. And it's pulling photos and videos.
It makes a human face that's an
artificial human face.
It's an artificial.
An artificial
it's not
face.
A real person's face.
You don't know.
You don't know.
You can't tell.
So it looks like a real person, and their mouth looks like it's saying these words.
Yeah, more or less. I would say 96% accurate. Okay. Then it goes into the open source, stock photo sources, and pulls video clips that are topical to about planes and piloting and college. And so you're seeing clips of people flying planes and getting on them and sitting in the pilot seat as it's telling you, here's what it takes to become a pilot. You take that video, the whole thing took 5 minutes maximum to make.
Yeah.
And you post it online and you can get revenue as a YouTube channel explaining how to do things. And so we just played with it for like a couple hours. And so my goal now is to figure out how do I create a limit around it, but realizing that even essay writing, right? It used to be, well, they can learn to type. They don't have to have handwriting, which is not true, completely true. They can learn to type, and so they don't need it as much. Or the argument around arithmetic, they don't need to know times tables because they'll always have a calculator with them. That used to be the argument teachers said, you won't have a calculator with you. What we should have said is, you'll have a calculator, but you won't even know which buttons to push because you don't understand what multiplication is, which actually happens all the time, no matter how many calculators you have. The same thing's going to happen with AI. So write me an essay about the Iliad, but you have to tell me what the themes are going to be and why, and we're going to have a conversation. But what if we did...
Okay, so wait, pause. What you're saying right now is, in light of this, you're restructuring your teaching, assuming that can be a part of how they do work.
Correct.
So you're re-asking them so that they do real work instead of asking them to write the work because that might not be what you can
not
ask
only that,
them
so one of the things I already do that I think is less traditional, and this is why I said I would argue I'm progressive in my work, right? One of the things that we already do is you read the book, and I say, what are the major themes? What do you think about the book? And they say, I'm not really sure. And then I say, okay, go read what other people have written about the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Go read the Wikipedia
Yeah.
page, the Sparks
Yeah.
notes, and
But
look
what
for the
you're
themes that are out
after
there.
is them to think about it, not necessarily them to.
Well, sort of.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to sit down from scratch, having read a book that you've never heard of, you've never talked to anyone about, and come up with the themes and the meaning of that book, it's an incredibly high level
That's right.
of thinking.
That's right. And I've read books over my life. I've some of them 3 and 4 and 5 times, and they continue to have things I did not see.
It's still revealing itself.
That's
to you.
right.
That's
It's still
true.
revealing.
But that quality is what I'm going for. I want them to have that skill. But knowing they don't have it, you can lower the expectation to say, well, read what other people said and tell me if you agree or disagree and why. And sort of wrestle with help. But what I worry about is, and education wrestles with this all the time, is when you make it easier, they don't get good at the more difficult skill necessarily, even if they get the ideas behind the Iliad when they're done. What they didn't get is the methods to find those ideas themselves.
Yep. I know what you mean.
But I would argue that even in if you went to high school 60 years ago and read the Iliad and wrote your essay, you probably didn't get that either.
Yeah.
Because it's actually rare and difficult for anyone to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
But are we becoming like the spirits in my class? I don't know about that. Maybe like the Holy Spirit. That's the goal.
Yeah. Well, if we went back up in a sense, did a little bit of final thoughts on this, I think the whole spirit question, I think the point of the question is, I think the ultimate point of the question is, there's probably a yes to the answer. And there is a tie in your idea of spirits, and it's another topic for another time is the role of spirits in helping mankind from a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
And what may that mean today versus 8,000 years ago. But let's assume for the moment, in the sake of conversation, that there is an engagement of the spiritual world with our world that is good and is bad. It's helpful and unhelpful. The reality is that when people are using the tech, I'm going at a baseline of it's inherently not moral or immoral. It's neutral, and the powers that are being given are like the spirits. But the good news is this: I'm not afraid of the spirits.
That is a huge marker.
We're afraid of Google and the government and stolen elections, and right? That's generating fears.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel it all the time and frustrated and angry, but I don't feel that towards the spirits. So there's 2 problems here. Number one,
is it because you don't pay enough attention to the spirits?
That's problem number 1. That's probably
that might be true.
You wrestle not with flesh and blood, Mike, but against principalities and powers.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think about that very often. Number 2, when I do think about it, because it's so difficult to know what it means, I take solace by the fact this, okay, here's all I can think about it, and there's much more. My refuge is that Jesus said I'm going to beat him.
Right.
That's it. I have no other recourse.
So how much of that, though, is theoretical, right? So
a lot of it is theoretical.
But here's what I mean. In theory, I know what to do if I see a shark in the ocean, which actually I don't, but let's just say let's say I had that knowledge or skill. When you actually see the shark and your body reacts in fear, it's a different story.
Yeah.
Right? And you can make that argument with ghosts or with spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to say, well, I know that Jesus carries all authority in the spirit realm, and therefore if I was interacting with some dark spiritual being.
But I think what's good
But then when you actually have to do it.
I know, I agree
and
with
so
you.
Politics is more like we actually have to do it. Whereas to think about the spirits and how that's a more theoretical, because we're not fighting
the other direction and say that in politics we should view it the same way as we do the spirits. Until I'm actually called to engage with something, I don't have to have a fear.
Yeah.
Now, when the thing comes up, I need to engage it. It might be hard, and I might be afraid, and I might have to learn what it means that Jesus is in control again. But I should do the same, because the truth is, I don't have anything to do with Arizona. I can't do anything.
There's
about
nothing you
Arizona.
can do about it. Yeah.
But I feel as if there is. I have nothing I can do with Washington, D.C., nothing I can do with Florida. All these things that engage me at a level.
You could have gone to January 6th.
I almost did. I thought about it, but okay. So there are some things that can be done, but my point being, we deal even the political realm. We think we're in the realm when we're not,
Yeah.
and I'm saying that the solace for me is I need to have the peacefulness that I do in the realm of spirits because I don't interact a ton directly in a way that is
Well,
forces me to realize it.
see, and I might take the opposite. I do take the opposite stance, which is I need to get more engaged. So I do need to get more engaged in what the heck Oregon Republicans are even doing, right? And I do need
Oh,
to.
I'm not disagreeing with that either. I mean,
Well,
about
but in both
engagement.
regards, I
Yeah.
also do want to get engaged, and I've been doing a lot of study in what does actual spiritual warfare actually mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a huge percentage of Jesus' ministry and that of the apostles was dealing with these evil spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we? Where's that in
Mm-hmm.
church? Right? Why do we have this form of church, and does it need to be adjusted?
That is another topic.
Yeah, that'll be a big day. Okay,
Yeah,
we're way past time.
we are.
We said we want to keep this to an hour. I think we have yet to do it, but this is On Second Thought, and I want to welcome you guys to come back next week when we'll be trying to do more of this, trying to look at things in a different way and wrestle with all the topics that are going on. So we appreciate you guys. Share this with anyone you think might enjoy it. We'll see you next time.
All right, we're out.